Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a really profound piece of American history, looking at excerpts from West Point's Black Cadets, a narrative history, The Four Horsemen of West Point, by Dr. Michael J. Winfield, Sr.
That's right. It's a focused look at the journey, the immense challenges, and the lasting impact of the very first African-American cadets at West Point. We're talking about the period between 1870 and 1889.
Yeah, and our mission here really is to try and understand these pioneers, get a feel for the huge societal forces they were up against, and, highlight why their stories are just so crucial to American history, not just footnotes.
Absolutely. And the source introduces several key figures, but it definitely puts a spotlight on Colonel Charles Young. His story is quite central, so we'll spend a good bit of time there.
Okay, sounds good. So let's unpack this source. Where does it start? Setting the scene.
It takes us right back to the Civil War, actually, reminding us that the Emancipation Proclamation, while monumental, was initially described in the source as a strategic military measure, even aspirational.
Right, not purely a moral declaration from the get-go, more complex. And it meant black men could enlist in the Union Army, but the reality for them was, well, pretty brutal, wasn't it?
Incredibly challenging, yeah. The source is very clear about the stark prejudice they faced, often, from within their own Union ranks.
There are some really difficult quotes in there from Union officers, aren't there? It gives you a real sense of it.
Yeah, tough to read. It mentions Samuel Kirkwood saying something like, "Part of the dead are niggers," and General John Logan saying he'd rather 6 niggers be killed than my brave boys. Yeah.
Wow. Coming from Union leaders, it just shows the depth of the racism they were fighting against, even on their own side.
Exactly. But it wasn't universal. The source contrasts this with General John White, who called the proclamation the most important public document ever issued, but also admitted he trembled for the consequences. Shows how charged it all was.
Definitely. But despite all that hostility, the bravery, the contributions of black troops were undeniable, right? The source highlights some key examples.
Oh, absolutely. A major one is the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, their famous assault on Fort Wagner in 1863.
Ah, yes, the 54th. That's where Sergeant William Kearny did something extraordinary, wasn't it?
That's right. He saved the regimental colors under heavy fire, became the first African-American awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for it. Just incredible heroism.
Incredible. And there's that detail about their commander, Colonel Shaw.
Yeah, Colonel Robert Shaw, their white commander. He was killed in the assault, and the Confederates buried him in a mass grave, saying, "with his niggers." But the source includes his father's response.
What did he say?
He expressed pride in that burial spot, saying his son died fighting for equality. A really powerful statement against the prejudice of the time.
It really is. But the danger wasn't just internal prejudice, was it? The Confederate reaction to black soldiers was officially brutal.
Extremely. The Confederate Congress actually passed a law. It declared captured black soldiers weren't prisoners of war, but insurgents, subject to summary execution.
So no protection under the laws of war, and this leads into Fort Pillow.
Yes, one of the most horrific events discussed. The Fort Pillow Massacre, April 1864. Major General Nathan Bedford Forrest's troops attacked the fort.
The accounts, they're grim.
Very. The source details reports, after a demand for surrender, that Union troops, many black, trapped by the river, were shot or bayoneted even while trying to surrender. Shouts of "no quarter."
Chillin'. Just chillin'.
And the source notes, there's historical debate about whether a formal surrender actually occurred, but the survivor accounts, the killing of civilian workers too, and just the casualty numbers.
What were they again?
Something like 277 to 295 Union dead, mostly black soldiers, versus only about 14 Confederates killed. The disparity is huge.
The source talks about how people viewed Fort Pillow afterwards. Different interpretations.
It does. It mentions Ulysses S. Grant saying the troops fought bravely but were overpowered. Others, like historian Robert S. Henry, called it an atrocity. Robert L. Fuchs argued it was intentional, sanctioned such barbarity.
And there was another view, something about Forrest.
Yeah, a view of it as a kind of group catharsis, holding Forrest responsible. And the source points out he later became the first national leader of the KKK.
Right. Regardless of the exact interpretation, the impact was significant.
Undeniable. As the source says, Fort Pillow became this powerful rallying cry. Remember Fort Pillow? It basically solidified the resolve of black soldiers. They knew surrender might mean death, so they fought even harder for freedom.
It's crucial context. And the source places this Civil War service within a much longer history, too, right? Black military service goes way back.
It does, yeah. All the way back to Crispus Attucks, the first casualty of the Boston Massacre, effectively the Revolutionary War. It notes George Washington initially barred black enlistment.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but he later rescinded the order, needing the manpower.
And the War of 1812.
Mentioned too. Freedom was offered for enlistment then. And there's a powerful quote from Richard Allen included. "This soil in America which gave them birth is their only true home. Here we intend to stay." Really grounding their service in their claim to the nation.
That's powerful. Does it mention women's roles at all?
Briefly, but importantly, it cites Harriet Tubman leading an armed expedition in 1863, highlighting that black women were also deeply involved in the struggle, taking huge risks.
Good. And the source credits historians for keeping these stories alive.
Yes, people like Joseph T. Wilson, who wrote The Black Phalanx, and Kowalski A. Salter. It makes the point that despite all this, these stories are still largely unknown among the general public.
Which is part of why we're talking about it. The source also uses a term, collective effervescence.
Right, borrowing from Emile Durkheim. It describes this shared sense of pride and energy, this uplift created by celebrating black war heroes, especially in the black press at the time.
Okay, so you have this long, proud, though often ignored tradition of service and heroism. But the crucial link missing, leading into the book's main focus, was what?
A tradition of black officers trained at West Point. Despite all that service, the nation's top military academy was essentially closed to them.
And the book describes West Point itself in pretty stark terms, doesn't it?
It does. Calls it the premier educational and military training institution, absolutely, but also, at that time, a redoubtable citadel of racism white supremacy. It systematically excluded black people.
For how long?
For its first 6 decades. No African Americans admitted at all. The change came in 1870 with James Webster Smith. But the source calls this step precarious and taken with pronounced reservation.
So not exactly rolling out the welcome mat.
Not at all. And Smith was just the first attempt. Between 1870 and 1889, the book says, approximately 27 African Americans tried to enter West Point.
27 attempts. And in that climate, described as one of hatred and intense racial intolerance. How many actually made it through?
Just 3. Only 3 black cadets graduated in those 2 decades.
3? Who were they?
Henry O. Flipper, John Hanks Alexander, and Charles Young.
Flipper, Alexander, and Young. And the book argues their experience, their collective struggles and successes, laid the groundwork.
Exactly. They became the foundation of black excellence, as the source puts it, for all the black cadets who would follow them. Their perseverance was critical.
Okay, so this brings us more directly to Charles Young, who the source focuses on more. Why him particularly?
Well, partly because his life and career after West Point were longer and arguably had a broader historical impact compared to Flipper and Alexander.
Tell us a bit about his background.
Born into slavery, but his parents, Gabriel and Arminta Bruin, were apparently very dynamic and really prioritized his education. That clearly set him up well.
He graduated in 1889, the third black graduate, but then something significant happened regarding the other 2.
Right. The source points out that Henry O. Flipper was dismissed on questionable charges. That's a whole other story. And John H. Alexander died prematurely, an untimely death.
Leaving
Charles Young as the only black American officer in the entire regular army for a period.
Wow. Just imagine that pressure, the isolation.
Exactly. The source calls him a shining lodestar for his people. He carried that torch alone for a time, and his accomplishments were substantial.
What kind of roles did he have?
The book lists quite a few. He served as a national park superintendent, He was the first black American military attaché serving in Haiti and Liberia. He commanded troops, Buffalo Soldiers, in Mexico in 1916.
So a really distinguished career. How was he seen at the time?
As a genuine national American hero, the source emphasizes he was lionized by his people, maybe even more famous than many celebrities are today. A huge figure.
But his path upwards had a major obstacle, didn't it? Something about becoming a general.
Tragically, yes. He was on track to become the first black general in the U.S. Army. But in 1917, right as the U.S. entered WWI, he was examined for promotion and they found a kidney condition, high blood pressure. On that basis, he was forced to retire medically. This timing was devastating, as it denied him the chance to lead troops in France during the war.
That must have been crushing. Was there pushback?
Oh, yes. Huge public outcry, lobbying from influential supporters, black and white, fighting for his reinstatement. Which leads to that, legendary story. The ride. To prove his fitness, he got on his horse in Wilberforce, Ohio, and rode all the way to Washington, D.C.
How far is that?
497 miles. in 16 days, averaging over 30 miles a day. Just an incredible act of defiance and determination. The source notes it's a story practically every Omega man knows. He was deeply involved in Omega Psi Phi fraternity.
Did it work? Was he reinstated?
He was, eventually, returned to active duty. But, and this is the heartbreaking part, it was only about a week before the armistice ended World War I.
Oh, no. So he missed his chance to command in France anyway.
He did. A bittersweet victory, really.
How did his story end?
The source tells us he died in 1922 while on an intelligence mission in Lagos, Nigeria. His death was mourned across the nation, the loss of its highest-ranking black officer at the time.
What a life. So pulling back, what's the ultimate legacy the source points to? For Young and for those first cadets.
It talks about Young as a powerful role model, his commitment to service to his fraternity. But more broadly, it emphasizes that the book itself aims to be, an accessible primer, a starting point for understanding these men and their era.
And it connects their efforts to the future.
Definitely. It loops back to the dedication, stressing how their sacrifices, their struggles, really did pave the way for all people to fulfill their dreams of service, regardless of race, creed, color, gender, or national origin.
A crucial legacy, and yet still not widely known.
That's the point the source makes. Despite their importance, these stories, the exploits of black soldiers and these pioneers, remain largely unknown among the general public.
So wrapping this up then, this deep dive, looking through Dr. Winfield's lens, it really highlights just the incredible courage, the sheer resilience of James Webster Smith, Henry Flipper, John Alexander, and especially Charles Young.
Yeah, navigating that intense racism, those systemic barriers, it's hard to really fathom it today, all while trying to serve their country.
They were true pioneers. Their struggles, their successes, they weren't just individual stories. They built a foundation, didn't they? Created that tradition against immense odds.
Absolutely. They showed what was possible, cleared that path.
It really leaves you thinking, though. Given everything they faced, the prejudice, the massacres like Fort Pillow, Young's forced retirement even as they were national heroes creating that collective effervescence, what does their story really tell us about the tangled relationship between military service, sacrifice, and the long, hard fight for equality in America?
And maybe how does knowing their specific stories, hearing those quotes, picturing Fort Pillow, picturing Young on that ride, how does getting down to that level of detail change your understanding, not just of the past, but maybe how we see things today?
Definitely something to reflect on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.